Meeting of the Farragut Planning Commission to order. Please, I need everybody to be quiet so we can get started. It's on, isn't it?
I think this is on. Okay.
Mine's on.
Mine's on.
Mine's not. Oh, mine's on.
I don't think mine's on.
Okay. So we've got a large group here tonight. I need everybody, please, to be quiet because it's a recording for TV and they can't hear when there's too much background noise. We're going to start out with citizens forum. This is when anybody who has a question that's not related to one of the items on the agenda, if they have a question or comment, they can speak at this time. Does anybody on the Planning Commission have a question or comment? Bart? No training or anything that we need to know about? Okay. Then we'll move on to the number 2, the approval of the agenda. We have 2 items that have either been withdrawn or postponed. Items number 5 and item number 10. Is there anything else? Is that
No, that's it.
a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Move on to the approval of the minutes for the August 15, 2019 meeting. Do we have any changes or adjustments to those?
Motion to approve.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
One abstain.
Abstain.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on revised site plan for drive-through lanes and building exterior modifications at the ORNL Credit Union at 11405 Municipal Center Drive, 1 Acre, Zone C-1 MUTC, Design Collaborative Applicant.
Madam Chairwoman, certain citizens came here today to hopefully avail themselves of the opportunity to speak at the citizens forum. Was that just skipped over, or is that still?
No, I did that the very first thing, and I asked that citizens forum is only for things that are not on the agenda. If you're here for an item on the agenda, please wait until that item comes up.
Well, I'm here for an item not on the agenda, as I indicated on the blue slip.
Okay.
What's that? Are you Ron Smith?
Jeffrey Kendall.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, be all right if he came on down to the microphone?
Right, come on. And we need your name and your address.
Sorry about that, Madam Chairwoman. I know you have a packed house for certain items today. Don't want to deviate from the attention there. My name is Jeffrey Kendall. I live at 12804 Pecos Road. You all likely remember me from several of the other commission meetings related to the Ivy Farms and Swan Farms development. Those progress there is being made very quickly. They're doing an amazing job developing Swan Farms on Kingston Pike in between Everett and Hobbs Road, as many of you know. As you know, the residents of Saddle Ridge appeared several times on this topic of Union Road development, Swan Farm development, and Ivy Farm development. And we got some concessions from the commission on a proposed draft plat for Ivy Farms that would sort of mitigate the amount of traffic that would be pumped through Saddle Ridge. We don't feel like there was complete conclusion on that, and though it seems like it's a ways off, issues within the community in Saddle Ridge continue to rise as that development continues day by day. So I wanted to come here today to engage with the commission and let you know that the connection of Pecos Road between Saddle Ridge and Ivy Farms is still a very big issue for the residents. We had several informational meetings throughout the summer, and residents were appalled at the prospect. And from their perspective, you got to understand they have children who live in the communities, who bike down to the pool, who use the clubhouse, and the road on the bottom of Saddle Ridge was built in the 1990s. It is ill-equipped to handle excess traffic that's going to be piped through to exit Hobbs Road onto the Watt exit onto Kingston Pike. So we've described for you several times, we've submitted letters, plats, explaining the high traffic nature of the bottom of Saddle Ridge and how that connection will create an increased safety hazard for our residents. This is something we want to continue to engage with the commission on as we go forward, but as it was left at the last commission meeting, it was, we're likely going to open it up, not until phase 3 of the construction. So at this point, our position is it still should not be opened up. No, we're not going to decide this today, but we're going to start the process. And before the next commission meeting next month, you will be receiving a formal letter from that Saddle Ridge HOA. They have voted to adopt a formal position opposing the connection. And the alternative, we've discussed safety bollards, gates, potentially bermed concrete sidewalk that would only be used for emergency vehicles. We understand the goal of what you're doing is this interconnected concept. Residents still aren't totally comfortable with it in Saddle Ridge, but I think they're getting there. This would be one way to earn the goodwill of the residents in light of where we ended on Union Road. And I hope to continue the engagement with the commission in the coming months so we can hopefully get final resolution so we can know what's coming as everything gets built up around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there someone else that has an item that's not on the agenda?
Yes. And Mr. Tim Sayers, also on Ivy Farms.
Good evening, my name's Tim Sayers. I live at 12812 Pecos Road in the Saddle Ridge subdivision. And I, like Mr. Kendall, am also here to talk about the issue of the Ivy Farm development and the Pecos Road connection. And I support all of the comments that he made. Also want to make a few other comments regarding it. At the end of the day, there's two parties that really have an interest in the connection on Pecos Road between Ivy Farms and Saddle Ridge. And that's the residents of Ivy Farm and the future residents of, or the residents of Saddle Ridge and the future residents of Ivy Farm. So we have folks from Saddle Ridge that are saying they are not interested in the connection for regular traffic. Also have talked to the developer, and he said he would prefer to not have it connection for regular traffic. The reason the connection is going through is because of the size of the development. It needs to have a second access for emergency vehicles. So it's not as if the connection is going to help residents in Fox Run or in any other subdivisions. It's between those two parties. So you know, we understand the need for the connection for the emergency vehicles. I think that the residents of Saddle Ridge could come around to that position, but we are definitely not interested in it for regular vehicle traffic, and asking the commission to take a step back, listen to the residents, think about the two parties that are affected, hear that both of them would prefer not to have the road for regular traffic, and do the right thing and say, let's not develop it for regular traffic, let's just have it for emergency traffic only. So I appreciate the time and consideration, and like Mr. Kendall said, we'll be back shortly with in the future with a letter from the residents stating the position that the residents of Saddle Ridge are not interested in this connection for regular traffic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I've noticed we have some Boy Scouts in the audience. Could we have a representative from each group, if you're not all together, and come up to the microphone and tell us your troop number and the badge you're here working on tonight? We always appreciate having Boy Scouts to be with us.
So today we're here from Troop 46. We meet on Cokesbury, and we are working on a communications merit badge as well as citizenship in the community merit badge requirement, including a community discussion based on some discussion or disagreement with two opposing sides. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, are you all together, these?
Yeah, we're just kind of split up.
So, okay, we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I want to go back and for everybody that's here tonight, actually, the Planning Commission meeting public comment protocol, please look over that. It's on the back of the agenda, and we ask that you please abide by these rules and regulations, or so our meetings can be civil meetings with as large a group as we have here tonight. Sometimes everybody wants to talk, and it's difficult to get to everybody. It's also difficult to have people all talking at the same time, so we ask that you please respect the other people who are here to talk tonight. Also, we have, if you're going to want to speak, please come up and get a blue card that should be at the door. and fill that out and hand it to our planning director, and he will call people's names. When he calls your names, usually we try to do 3 or 4 names at a time, and one person talk, and we have everybody lined up, so we don't have to wait for you to crawl out from where you're sitting and walk around there. So, and the other thing is that because we have such a large group, we have to limit it to 5 minutes per individual speaking. We have a timer here, and I will hit the gavel and tell you that it's time is up, because we want as many people as need to and want to get up and talk. But we do have to limit it. If everybody here had their 5 minutes, we'd all be here for breakfast in the morning. So, and please, one of the things that I always emphasize is don't just repeat what other people have said. Give us some new information. That's why we're here, is to gather information. And so please read over this on the back of the agenda. So with that, we will move on to item number 4. As I said, it's a discussion and public hearing on a revised site plan for the drive-through lanes and building exterior modifications at the ORNL Credit Union, 11405 Municipal Drive, 1 acres on C-1 MUTC Design Collaborative Applicant. Bart, and we have with us tonight, manning the microphone and the computer, Bart Hose, who is our Assistant Director of the Planning Office.
Okay, this is a revised site plan from an item that you first saw in July. At that time, there was some concern about the color scheme on the exterior renovations for the ORNL Credit Union that's located across the street here from Town Hall. The applicants have addressed that. It was postponed last month while they were addressing those items. The main issue at the time in July that the Planning Commission was concerned about was the amount of the bright blue that was going on. They were really proposing an entire accent wall of the bright blue. They've removed all that. This is what they're proposing now. I think most of their blue will now be integrated into their sign colors. So based on what they've submitted in terms of revision, staff can recommend approval of the revision. At the July meeting, you had approved the site plan elements of it, and they've actually been over there working on it. It was really just the exterior color schemes that were at question.
Does anybody on the Planning Commission have any questions or comments?
They removed
And you to
everything,
say,
but
Bart,
are they
that
gonna
there's
put-
no blue, oh, I'm sorry. Is
I'm
somebody-
Good.
Rose?
Did I understand that there is going to be no blue on it now?
Well, they've eliminated the blue from the
Drive-through.
drive-in islands and
Yeah.
also that entire blue wall that they had proposed.
Okay.
So,
But will there be any blue on it?
Blue in the monuments.
Their sign will be blue.
Oh, just their sign, okay. All right.
The applicant?
Hi, I'm Lynn Holt, 414 Sherwood Estate Circle. Originally, we had planned on the blue wall, then when we came here, we decided to go ahead and move forward with the remodel and then come back with a different scheme. Working with Mark and Design Collaborative told us that the blue was not even going to be permissible at all. So we went back with just a wood grain wall and then come back with some signage and then integrate the blue into the sign itself.
Okay. Does that answer your questions, or?
Roseanne asked my question.
Okay.
The applicant know how much we appreciate your cooperation. I suspect that your corporate folks may have been a little frustrated with that, and you guys really stepped up to the plate and got it resolved and found something that hopefully you're happy with as well as we are. So very pleased with it, and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That work that's been done so far looks really well, really good.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Is that all you need to discuss?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming. Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a request for variance from the subdivision regulations for the requirements to construct a sidewalk along the connector street in association with the resubdivision plat for the property at 632 Red Mill Lane, 1.96 acres, 2 lots, zone R-1, site incorporated applicant.
Okay, this is a minor subdivision plat. They're taking a tract that's slightly less than 2 acres in size. They're dividing off an existing home site and leaving the remainder of the property. They do require 2 variances, so the first variance is this particular item, and then the second variance will be item 7. In this case, they're requesting a variance from the requirement to construct a sidewalk along Red Mill Lane. This is a very minor subdivision action. They're just creating one additional lot to build a sidewalk there that would be probably just shy of 400 feet of sidewalk that, would be an expensive proposition and, not really proportional to the subdivision action and the amount of impact they're doing. So based on that and the minor nature of the subdivision action, the staff can recommend approval of the variance. That's something that you've done in the past for minor plats like this.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I do. Suppose that one of those lots, the 1.53 acres, the larger one, in the future want to be subdivided further. Would they come before us again, Bart?
Yes, they would have to again.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Comments?
There is enough square footage there that you could subdivide another 3 lots out of that lot 2, potentially, and still meet the R1 requirements.
And then you're worrying about access onto,
Onto Red Mill.
Red Mill.
And there's a lot of traffic on Red Mill.
The second variance deals with the access provision for this, so
what is Red Mill classified?
local collector street.
Any more questions or comments? Do I have a motion on the variance?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Did you hear that it was Betty?
I did, thank you.
Discussion in public hearing on a request for a variance from the driveway and other accessway ordinance for the distance between driveways in association with a re-subdivision plat for the property at 632 Red Mill Lane, 1.96 acres, 2 lots zoned R-1, site incorporated applicant.
Okay. This is again the same subdivision. This is the second variance they need for this. Basically, because Red Mill Road is a local collector street, our driveway separation requirements are 200 feet from driveways and other intersecting streets. They can't get that on the second lot really anywhere. So what they proposed is a single driveway entrance that's going to be aligned with Crossbridge Circle, which is a street on the other side of Red Mill. They're also going to restrict the access to the second lot to that point. So if there was further subdivision, all the access to any additional lots would have to be from that point. That's a good provision given, the concern about future access along Red Mill being a collector and having too many driveways together on that. So that was a proposal that the applicants made to satisfy the variance requirement. The town's engineering staff has looked at that. They're comfortable with that, and staff can recommend approval of the variance, which should be one action, and then we can also recommend approval of the plat and the subdivision action, subject to all the certificates being signed off on.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments?
It looks like it's 153 feet, is that right, between the 2 driveways,
Yeah.
potential driveways?
And
So that,
it's across from
Yeah.
right.
that street.
Most
Really
importantly, it lines up with that street across the street, and I think that makes sense.
Better.
It's really the most critical issue is to get that
Yeah.
aligned.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Approve?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Moving on to item number 8, discussion in public hearing.
We may need to,
do the plat?
we probably need to approve the plat as
Yeah,
well.
we to approve the plat.
If we could have a second motion on that, and then that would just be subject to all the certificates being signed off on.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So now we'll move on. discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Brookmere Phase 1, Parcel 044, Tax Map 152, 430 Virtue Road, 39.54 acres, 50 house lots, 4 open space lots, zoned R-1 OSR, Ryan Lynch, Lynch Surveys LLC, applicant.
This is Phase 1 of Brookmere subdivision. This phase is approximately 50 house lots. It's got 4 open space lots, quite a bit of the open space, particularly down in the flood zones along Turkey Creek. There's a greenway connection that'll be part of this that parallels Turkey Creek for the length of the property. It'll eventually tie in with a town greenway. They're putting in a pedestrian crossing of the creek along with the main crossing for the access road into that development. They've had to do some floodplain work and an actual revision to the flood maps in that area because of that. I've provided you all with our most updated staff recommendations. The applicant has been working on those recommendations. They've addressed, or they either have addressed or are in the process of addressing our staff recommendations 1 and then 3 through 9. Really, the only outstanding recommendation that needs to be discussed here is the fact that they have a note on the plat by the surveyor that the iron pins will be set at the end of construction, which has not been the typical process that you all have had, here at the town. I think the applicant is here, and I think they'd like to potentially request the Planning Commission to consider accepting a letter of credit for the iron pins being set. At the staff developer conference, there was some discussion about what other jurisdictions are doing for developments like this that, where the builder is doing the subdivision and also building the home sites, or I should say the homes. I checked some of the surrounding jurisdictions, and Knoxville, Knox County both have a certificate that is available to developers to use a letter of credit for the iron pins. That's, again, your regulations do allow the Planning Commission to accept a letter of credit or some other sort of bonding instrument that's acceptable to the town for final improvements that are typically required. It hasn't really been the Planning Commission's practice to do that in the case of letter of credits, or I should say in the case of iron pin setting, but it is a potential option, and I think they'd like to probably address the Planning Commission and ask, whether or not you'd be willing to entertain that.
We had talked about that a lot at the staff developer meeting, and the difficulties of setting the pins before construction is done, because there's so much that's getting torn up. And I think that if this is what Knox County is doing in the city of Knoxville, it seems reasonable to me to do that. But I think that we would probably want to just amend our subdivision regulations to resolve this issue permanently. But I don't know how. No, you build. What do you think about that?
My initial instinct is that there is a lot of opportunity to pull the pins out when you're adding some other utilities, mostly going to be like cable TV and telephone, maybe natural gas. The challenge that I have is when you get a CO and you sell the house, that's when I think the pins do need to be in. And so and Mr. Money probably has a few words that he'd like to share about what his thoughts are one way or another if that would work for him. But it seems to me that when you sell the house, those pins are going to be important.
Yep.
And so now we could tie it into the CO. This is, hey, as long as the pins are installed prior to the CO and, for a house in this particular phase, if that's something that he's comfortable with, I think that's completely justifiable and makes sense. But I think the pins need to be in before a homeowner actually could have the opportunity to move in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Tell us who you are and give us an address.
You mean the pins wouldn't be in before? Oh,
Roseanne,
all
let's
right.
get
Go ahead,
this
Bob.
information.
I am Bob Money. I am not with Lynch Surveying. I am the developer. I am the president of Homestead Land Holdings, who is the developer. And I totally agree with
And
Noah.
address. An address.
Oh, 122 Perimeter Park Road, Knoxville.
Thank you.
37922. I agree with Noah, because if we put the developments that, I've done a few developments in Farragut and a few in Knox County, and we never put the pins in. We didn't put the pins in at Brass Lantern, we didn't put the pins in at Briarstone, because the utility companies tear them out, and it costs us money to put them in. So when we do sell a house, there is always a survey required, and I think that's an excellent time, and that's when we do put the iron pins in. We identify the lot corners early, so we market the subdivision, but we don't put the pins in until somebody buys the house.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I researched not only Knoxville and Farragut, but also nationally. I looked at the trend, and it's very common practice to get a letter of credit for the pins so they don't have to go through what you were just describing. So I think it's a natural step for us to do. My only question is, as Louise said, we probably need to do something to document that process so we don't go through the same negotiation every time. So we probably need to put that somewhere in our procedures to have that as an option. But it's common practice, and I think we ought to agree with that and adopt that practice.
From a,
Not be when you sell a lot, not the house.
That was my comment.
Well, yes, if you transfer the lot,
You
whether there's
transfer
a
the
house
lot.
on it or not,
Yeah.
it needs to have pins.
It could be the house or a lot. I think it's really pretty important to understand that Mr. Money's developing the whole subdivision. If it was a open build subdivision, I think it would be a different story, because you could end up with somebody that would maybe buy and not finish, and then what would you have?
I think Noah's got a great idea. Just the ordinance says that when the lot transfers from the developer to someone else, whether there's a house on it or not, the pins have to be in place. I think that's a great idea. And this is the first time it's ever come up. All the subdivisions I've done in Farragut, it's the first time it's ever been addressed.
well,
I'm comfortable with it. The only thing is we don't really have a way, when there's a transfer down at the Register of Deeds office, there's not any indicator here. Bob, what are your thoughts about having it just tied to your CO, as long as you got your pins in at your CO?
Absolutely.
And that is a way that you've got, the planning office has something to say, all right, you guys got your pin set, you can go out there, and it's pretty darn easy to see the pin. Usually they've got a yellow cap on them.
Well-
And especially when a yard's brand new, they're usually easy to locate, and just something just to mark off the list.
well, from a staff perspective, we've discussed this somewhat internally in terms of what we might need to, deal with this type of issue going forward. From a policy standpoint, there are some concerns we have as to exactly how to administer it. I think we want to discuss it and maybe come to the planning commission with, some ideas in terms of more standard policy for doing this sort of thing. I think getting a letter of credit's important, because a developer could, really sell the entire development off. They could sell it off at auction, sell lots off separately to different builders. And once the plat is signed by the planning commission, the lots are eligible to be sold, signed and recorded. So we do have to think beyond, developers that operate the way Bob does in terms of subdividing and building, and make sure that our regulations and policies capture all of those alternatives, and that we have, things in place to be able to, deal with those, various options or contingencies that might come up. We definitely feel it's important to have a letter of credit in place, because if the planning commission is signing off on the plat saying that, the improvements are there or will be there, if a surveyor were to default on the obligations of the plat note, or if a developer were to, really the town or the planning commission would be on the hook to have those pins set. So, there needs to be some guarantee that they're going to be set.
Have you guys come up with a formula on the letter of credit?
That was my
Right now, we
question.
don't. That's another issue. Our regulations now are set up for letters of credit to be determined by the town engineer, in terms of value and conditions. No one on the town's engineering staff is a surveyor, so we'll probably have to get an estimate, from the surveyor as to what the cost is going to be, and then use that as a basis to set a reasonable letter of credit that would cover the cost plus the cost for the town to bid the project out and to administer the project in the future. So any recommendation on that would be, subject to a letter of credit being posted and the amount and conditions to be approved by town staff.
Bob, what he's saying, but Bart's saying it's going to cost the town a whole lot more than it cost you
Right,
if
just
you ever
put-
had set those
put 'em in.
pins.
Yeah, it just depends on how many times I have to replace them. I can get you the cost for putting the pins in tomorrow morning, 'cause Ryan
Well,
Lynch
I
is
think
gonna
what Bart's
send 'em.
saying is in the event of some disaster, some unforeseen disaster, and the town had to pick up the tab on it and use the letter of credit, they just want to make sure that the letter of credit is sufficient in funds to be able to cover that. I think in the interest of trying to let you keep going on your project, I'd be comfortable, obviously pending whatever dollar amount that the staff comes up with, approving a variance from setting the pins with a letter of credit, as well as just tying them, just make sure the pins are in at the CO.
It's not necessarily a variance because your regulations, as they stand now, do make provisions for the planning commission to accept sureties for really any of the prerequisites for final approval. So now you typically do it for the final coat of asphalt that goes down, the top coat of asphalt. Oftentimes you do it for sidewalks because, again, you don't want those to be destroyed.
Stabilization
during
is a good one. We use
things
you
like
do a
that.
lot on.
So you are already taking letters of credit for elements of the prerequisite
Okay.
for final approval. It's just you haven't, as a matter of practice, taken a letter of credit for the pins. So it's not a variance condition. It's just a matter of you, rather than requiring the pins to be set on the front end, you're
More of a
willing to
it's
accept
more of a policy decision than it is just something we just haven't done in the past. But it does make a lot of sense
Yes, sir.
what the applicant's requesting.
My only concern is how long will it take to get the amount for the letter of credit? I'm moving forward and working with the whole
When
town.
can we have that for him? The amount of the letter?
It'll probably be the first of next week. If we get an estimate tomorrow, then we can sit
I'll
down
get
at
it to
staff
you
level
tomorrow.
and think
First
about
next week being Monday?
Monday, Tuesday, depending
Pardon?
on Mark and I would say Monday or Tuesday, depending
Monday,
on Mark
Tuesday.
and
Okay,
or
if we go
Darryl.
Tuesday at the latest, I'll get you the amount tomorrow morning, and then you get me the amount for the letter of credit by the end of the day Tuesday.
We'll do our best.
Okay?
Well, the town's going to have to put a fudge factor in there. It just is what it is, and I'm sure you're prepared
Yeah.
for that. It's just,
It's
but I do
okay.
agree with. I think it does make sense. I think it makes more sense when you've got a developer builder versus just a developer, and we may have to deal with that at another date when we're talking about maybe codifying something in the future to address this. So,
Sounds good.
Any other questions or comments?
No, there is one citizen that wants to speak on this, Mr. Ron Smith.
He doesn't want to speak on this. He doesn't want to speak on this. Which one, Wyndham Hall?
Good evening. My name is Ron Smith, and I live at 532 Wyndham Hall Lane, and I am the Vice President of the Wyndham Hall Homeowners Association, which constitutes 62 homes. And Madam Chair, I have a issue paper that, if, with your permission, I'd like to hand out to the commission.
Yeah, and he'll pass them on down to us.
thank you, sir.
I believe that everyone here this evening agrees that the town of Farragut is a wonderful place to live, and future growth of the town can be a wonderful thing if our road infrastructure is adapted to meet the needs of the growth. I would like to discuss the concerns of what appears to be the lack of a town of Farragut comprehensive traffic study and corrective action plan regarding the two items that are before the Planning Commission tonight. Those two items are the final plat for Brookmere Phase 1 and a request to rezone a portion of Parcel 069 to R4 and R6. I believe that it's a safe assumption that eventually, no matter what goes on here tonight, either homes, townhomes, or apartments will be built on these properties. I believe it is also a safe assumption that the future residents of these homes will want to travel east on the interstate, will want to travel to Turkey Creek commercial areas. So how will they get there? There's two logical choices. are Kingston Pike to North Campbell Station Road or Smith Road to Grigsby Chapel Road to North Campbell Station Road. Of these two choices, Grigsby Chapel Road approach will likely be the first to be selected, as it has fewer traffic control devices, has little traffic enforcement, and only one school zone. And we all know that Grigsby Chapel Road is already heavily traveled, especially during the weekday morning rush hours when significant backup occurs most mornings. The TDOT traffic study conducted last year in February at traffic station 442 on Grigsby Chapel Road revealed the average weekday traffic count to be 16,973 vehicles per weekday. This traffic count is also revealed that on weekdays between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., an average of 1,130 vehicles pass the traffic count every hour. That's one vehicle every 3.2 seconds. When the two properties being discussed tonight are developed, along with the proposed Grigsby Park townhouse subdivision, all of the current subdivisions feeding traffic onto Grigsby Chapel Road will be impacted. School bus services along Grigsby Chapel Road will be impacted, and potentially emergency response times will also be impacted. The increase of the traffic on Grigsby Chapel Road has the potential to reach dangerous proportions. Additionally, we are expecting significant daily backups, we are experiencing significant daily backups every morning from the North Campbell Station Road intersection with Grigsby Chapel Road and Parkside Drive to the Farragut Primary School, and from North Campbell Station Road intersection with Grigsby Chapel Road and Parkside Drive to the junction of I-40 during most evening rush hour. In conclusion, the town of Farragut is a wonderful place to live, and future growth of the town can be a wonderful thing if our road infrastructure is improved in advance of the growth, or at least along with the growth. And I'm requesting that the town delay approval of any new subdivision until a comprehensive road improvement study can be completed to determine the best ways to modify our road infrastructure to support the town's current residents and meet the needs of future growth. This comprehensive road improvement study should be expected to develop short-term, mid-range, and long-term solutions. And I appreciate the being able to address the commission tonight. Are questions?
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
I believe I'll take that.
Okay.
First off, Mr. Smith, appreciate you coming and bringing this up. It's a problem that we do recognize in the town, and our town engineer is very good at grant writing. He got a right about $6.9, I think, million grant total to improve our red light system. This new red light system will be something that will be able to see some of these problems to where we can adjust as needed. That's one item. The other item is, of course, the Campbell Station exit. We have put in for improvement to that exit. We found out that our traffic count on that exit was quite high, and we have put in for that. That does take time, and we're trying to be proactive on that based on some of the traffic studies that we've done across the town and at the Lovell Road exit as well. So it is something we are looking at. Like I said, the red light system will be a great help. The new style red lights will, and also hopefully we can be smiled upon by TPO and TDOT to do something with our exit sooner than later.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I obviously am not a traffic expert, but there are, and we all know about the problems at the Grigsby Chapel, Parkside, and North Campbell Station Road. That happens every morning with the school, with just the amount of traffic that meets that intersection. there are short-term solutions that could be implemented. And when I say short-term, I'm talking about things that could be implemented within 1 to 2 years. And that could be something as simple as what UT does for every traffic football game. They put a police officer at the intersection who controls the light. That would be a safe way for the patrolman to control traffic, be right there on the spot to see what the actual situations are, and allow the flow of traffic to go as it needs be. So those are just things that we believe that it's very important that there be some sort of traffic infrastructure improvement committee be developed.
Well, we also realize the issues. These new red lights will be such that we can see this actually from the town hall. We'll be able to see these backups, and the lights can be adjusted accordingly.
May I add just a little bit to that? The problem with the morning traffic is not a traffic problem, it's a stacking problem at Farragut Primary, and the fact that Farragut Primary is so close to that intersection. So many parents come to drop their kids off because the buses run so early that they all kind of stack up into the parking lot, and that flows out into the street. So timing of lights, I don't think is going to solve that situation because it's a stacking issue, and you can't widen a road for a stacking issue. I think that's the rub with that morning traffic is that's a difficult problem to solve.
And you're absolutely right. When the school is getting their children in, that is a stacking problem. But there's really, that backup goes much longer than that because of just the amount of traffic. So you're absolutely correct, but there are two problems there.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Ready? Okay. Is that all the questions and comments we have on that? particular
I'd just
item?
like to comment about the roundabout on Virtue Road. Have you all been down there? I think it's going to be very effective.
And it's nice looking, too.
Yes, it is.
Have we gotten reflectors on that? Have we gotten reflectors on that? Are they going to put on the one end?
I think that's the plan, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to move on to item number 9? Is that the only speakers we have?
I don't think we still need to approve the plat on number 8, don't we?
Yeah.
I move for approval, subject to the 9 stipulations, and also with clarification on item number 2 to require a letter of credit.
I'll second.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? And Mark will work with you next week
Thank you.
on that amount.
Thanks, guys.
And Mart, and Bart. And we'll hear from you all in the next short period of time with meeting as to a new procedure on this.
Like I said, it's not a variance issue. It's something that the regulations potentially provide for. We just want to, at the staff level, sit down and think about sort of all the pros and cons of doing it, and what different scenarios could pop up in terms of different types of developers, different types of sales that might occur, whether someone is selling the entire subdivision or just parts of it, or as a unified builder like this one, and just how we go about actually administering the letters of credits and dealing with that type of issue. So it's something we need to just sit down internally, maybe talk to a couple developers about, talk to some surveyors about, and really what brought this about was the surveyor's note. Typically we see a surveyor's note on the plat that says that all the iron pins have been set, and in this case the note was that they will be set upon completion of construction. So that's sort of what raised the red flag and really brought this to our attention. So,
Okay.
Bart, have we actually had any problems regarding setting pins in properties?
no, not really. But in
Good.
I think you
Understand.
could.
I understand,
mean, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 9 now. Is it 9? Yeah.
Yeah.
Discussion on a request to rezone a portion of parcel 069, tax map 142, north of the old Ingles Shopping Center from R1, which is rural single-family residential, and R2, general single-family residential, and B-1 buffer to R4, attached single-family residence, and R6, which is multiple family residence. 32.7 acres, John Baker Horn Properties applicants. And I'd like to talk a little bit before we get started on that about the fact that this is a workshop item. It's for discussion tonight only. There's no vote on this at all tonight. This means that it will be back before the Planning Commission at some other point. But right now, there's no voting, and the Planning Commission recommends rezoning to the Board of Mayor and Alderman, so it will go from the Planning Commission to the Board of Mayor and Alderman. And as with any workshop item, we're just, as a Planning Commission, we're just here to gather information on this rezoning request. The Planning Commission is asking questions of the staff and the applicant, and we are not here tonight to discuss the merits of the project, just to gain information about the project. The staff will present the item, and the applicant will present the project and the reason for their request for the rezoning, and this is a rezoning tonight. The Planning Commission will ask questions of the staff and the applicant, and then after we have asked our questions and gotten the information that we need to consider down the road, if there's questions that anyone in the audience has not gotten answered already by what we're asking, then we'll ask that you come up and ask your question. We do ask that you hold it to, like I said before, 5 minutes per person or less, but no more than 5 minutes. And hopefully we will ask the questions that you're interested in also. So, Bart, sorry about that. Yeah. Okay.
This again is a rezoning request. It is just a workshop item for tonight. It involves an approximately 41-acre tract that you can see there in the center portion of the slide that runs from the back of the Ingles Shopping Center up to Boring Road, currently it's zoned a mix of R1, B1, and R2, although the bulk of it is zoned R1. You can see there that's a light yellow color.
And that zoning R1 is attached or
That's
rural
our
single
low-density,
family.
single-family residential zone. It's really a rural single-family residential district. Again, it affects that property. The land use plan for the area right now does call for that to be medium-density residential. The rezoning that's being requested is a mix of rezoning. They would like to rezone approximately 25 acres to R6, which is currently a medium-density district, although we are in the process of making changes to that, and I'll discuss that in a minute. They want to do another 7.7 acres is R4, which is a slightly lower density, and allows for attached residential and duplexes, which is what they're proposing. And they do have a very conceptual site plan that we have a slide for that I'll get to in a minute. And then they want to leave the remaining 7.35 acres as R1, and that would be up in the top corner along Boring Road. So their concept is to sort of phase density from the Ingles Shopping Center, which is zoned commercial, up into a medium-density multifamily type housing, then put a transition area in that would be R4, which would be duplexes, and then finally stay as R1 there up along Boring Road. So it would be phased density from the commercial back to Boring Road. Again, the existing land use plan does identify that area for medium density. This is the existing zoning for the area. Again, it's a mix of R1, R2, which is a slightly higher density. It's our general single-family zone. There's some higher density residential zones there as well for Waverly Court, which is zoned R4, and Baldwin Park, which is zoned R3. There's also an area here, might be easier if I do this. Which is not catching right now. Here we go. This area right here is where the village is, the senior community is being built, so that's a higher density development as well.
That's the lighter pink area there.
Yes, it doesn't show up real well on the map, but it is this area right. For some reason, it's not bounding well, but it's that one right there that's currently under construction. If you've all noticed that. Again, this is the rough concept they've turned in. Of course, this is really just conceptual at this point. They're right now here to discuss the possibility of having the property rezoned to a mix, and again, based on what they are proposing, this area here would be the multifamily that they're right now proposing to be zoned R6. Then this portion back here would be the R4, and then it would transition back to this section here that they propose to leave as R1 along Boring Road.
And Baldwin Park that abuts their R4 plan is R3.
It would be a combination of R4 and the R1 that would be remaining up there on Baldwin Road. Yeah. No. So the rezoning would affect, the property or a substantial portion of the property. Again, that property is currently zoned mostly R1, a little buffer there between the property now and the Ingles site. There are some issues with regard to Boring Road, which is very substandard. That would have to be improved to support any higher density development in that area. I believe the property owner is aware of that and would probably be looking to make improvements to Boring Road to support the project. The town would want a traffic study to go along with that as well. And I think what they're proposing would be approximately 200 units of multifamily. Here are my notes. Yeah, approximately 200 dwelling units on the 25 acres that would be R6. Another, which works out to about 8 dwelling units per acre. Another 10 duplexes, which would be 20 dwelling units on the 7.7 acres they're proposing to zone R4. And then the rest would, just stay at the R1 density.
The Planning Commission really, at this point, is looking at rezoning, right? So
yes,
this
ma'am.
concept plan would not be firm.
No, they provided the concept to give you an idea of how they're proposing to transition the density from the, from the Ingles commercial area backward, back towards the existing development behind it, with a apartment, high density type development, then a duplex area to act as a transition on back. But no, they would not be obligated to that plan. This is purely a discussion about the possibility of rezoning the property.
Now, we all know that Boring Road has been widened from Smith Road to the boundary of Baldwin Park, right? And then from that boundary of Baldwin Park there on Boring Road all the way to Kingston Pike, Boring Road is definitely substandard.
Yes.
So this concept plan appears to really just affect that portion of Boring Road from Kingston Pike to the R1 area, the 7 acres plus, right? But would that whole road have to be considered?
That would have to be discussed, certainly.
Okay.
I would agree that it'd have to be considered because that if this was to happen, then the traffic would go both ways, so it would affect
Absolutely. That's my concern.
all part of the road, no matter, I mean, it would actually affect from Baldwin Park, where that improvement ends,
Yeah.
all the way to Kingston Pike.
Do you want to hear from the applicant first, or are you done?
One other point is, if the planning commission remembers, there were text amendments made to the land use plan last year that modified the medium density classification and brought the density down to a maximum of 8 units per acre, from 6 to 8. And then y'all created a higher density land use category that would be from 8 to 12. That'll end up working well with this because they are proposing 8 units per acre.
If they stick with that plan.
If they stuck with that. The R6, right now, the R6 zoning allows up to 12 units per acre. So, from a staff perspective, if zoning is, if the rezoning is entertained, we would probably recommend that it be done in conjunction with the changes that are also underway to modify the zoning ordinance to create a true medium density zone that would top out at 8 units per acre to match the land use plan. That's something that staff is working on, and we were hoping to bring you a draft of that in October. So.
Is that all?
Yep, that's
Okay. Applicant? And please give us your name and address of your business.
John Baker, Horn Properties, 412 North Cedar Bluff Road, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37923. Can I approach and give some handouts?
Just give it, he'll pass them down for you.
I'll let everybody get those handouts. First of all, what those include is something that Bart has already spoken about, is the town's adoption of the future land use plan. We are falling in conformance through town recommendations that the density be lowered from 6 to 12 down to 8 units an acre for the first phase of this development. We are working coincidentally with contract with Continental. They are a national multifamily developer. They do a lot of research before they come into town. They figured they've done a lot of different market studies, of which is attached to this, but I've got some updated that I've gave to all the members of the Planning Commission for review. That has been one source of concern that I've heard through the town, through previous discussions, that how would this affect the town center concept? Through the data, if you'll scroll back to the second to the last page, I'm going to read from this. They've done study for 5 miles from the town center, right here at Town Hall. They've got basically only 19% of the households are renters, while the national average is 34%, suggesting pent-up demand for rental housing. So the demand is there. That's why they're wanting to invest their capital in this market. They don't just come to a market to waste their time. Demand is particularly evident in municipal Farragut, given 99 to 100 occupancy rates among existing developments. Projected population growth of 1.8% annually will create demand for roughly 1,655 households over the next 3 years. Of that amount, 399 units for over the next 3 years are warranted. Continental is proposing 200 units at this location. We have no objection to cap this location for our intended use at 8 units an acre. That's what they're proposing as part of phase 1. Right now, the city or the town only has an R6 zoning. We are a high density user. It is a medium density classification. As Bart mentioned, we are doing the step down transitional use from the commercial to the R6 down to R4 and then to Baldwin Park. We've incorporated additional land for potential for a park, walking dogs, interactive of people can walk to the Ingles Shopping Center throughout through Baldwin Park. All that will be implemented. Part of our contract with Continental also encompasses to widen Boring Road from Kingston Pike to the northern boundary of this proposed zoning. We have not discussed the consideration of anything north or all the way to Baldwin Park at this time. The land for the Continental properties is about 25 acres that we have under contract at this point. The units, there were some questions on that. It will not exceed 2 stories in height. We're very sensitive to visibility for the community. We can implement as much landscaping or interconnectivity through the development as necessary. But I want to further iterate that even if the town center were to get apartments today, Continental will still want to do this plan because they're not afraid of the need for the apartments. That's all I had to say. Do you have any questions?
Anybody on the planning commission have a question?
I feel like, I know that we're supposed to be taking information and asking questions today, but I feel like as an elected official, I really need to share with you where I stand on this.
Okay.
Because I don't want you guys wasting time. If the elected officials feel as similarly, I don't know, I'm one vote. But I have concerns with our land use plan to begin with in this area. And that's what I'm kind of addressing is the land use plan. This is medium density residential, and it calls for a mix of housings, may include single-family houses, small multi-family dwellings, duplex, triplex, townhomes, and small condo apartment buildings. They're intended to be on a gridded or semi-gridded street network. And the problem with suburban apartment complexes is they tend to be very self-contained. And that isn't necessarily the goal of medium-density residential in this location. So I'm really struggling with that use here. I understand that right now there is demand for apartments, but demands for apartments ebb and flow. And what we put here needs to make sense for the long-term relevance of this area, for the long-term relevance of the town of Farragut, because there won't always be that demand. So it has to make sense from a land use perspective. So I'm going back to the land use plan, and I look at it, and we have the back of this, first off, the back of this, we're between Waverly Court and Baldwin Park, is a section of property that's kind of got cut in half when we rezoned with civic institutional. And it is now shown as medium-density residential between 2 low-density residential uses. So that clearly needs to change. That makes no sense from a land use perspective that we would up in density next to 2 low-density residential. In the front, we have what we're calling is mixed neighborhood mixed use. Ingles is redeveloping as a commercial. It's not going to be mixed use. It's commercial, and there's a 20-foot berm that separates the front portion of this where Ingles is and the rear portion. On paper, what's supposed to happen is the mixed use is supposed to integrate with the medium-density residential that's behind it, which is absolutely impossible because there's a 20-foot planted berm that runs the length of that behind Ingles. For that reason, I look at that front section, and that needs to be changed to commercial from a land use perspective. So that leaves us with the rear portion we're looking at as low-density residential. And then we have this small section in between that really lends itself to single-family or single-family attached. Given the constraints of that area, given that there's not going to be any connection to the front, I think our issue is we have a land use plan problem here that the Planning Commission probably needs to address. We've opened up the land use plan in different areas to look at them, to readdress them, and this is one of those areas that I think we need to address and look at. I felt like I needed to share with you what my concerns were, and I understand that I am one vote, but those are my concerns.
Do you have more people to speak?
Do you want to speak to that?
Thank you. I'm Doug Horn, same address as John Baker, and Christy Myers, our attorney. She's here too, our company attorney. I know a lot of people here in the audience don't want apartment community here. We came before the board 3 or 4 years ago for apartment community off of Smith Road. We transitioned with the help of the staff and with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to a senior facility, which is going to be great, assisted living, memory care, and some independent villas. It'll open, I think, in about 30 days. So we're thankful for that. I want to say, too, we're thankful for the town of Farragut. Betty knows we've been here from day one. We started a newspaper to record the happenings of the town of Farragut, the Farragut Press, 31 years ago. Michelle's here tonight recording this. We try to run an objective paper, but we're proud of this community. I'm a 63 graduate of Farragut High School. I've known all you folks for a long time. You've known me. We're trying to cooperate with the town every way we can. We're a big believer in Farragut. I'm a pro-life business Democrat, but I voted for Ronald Reagan twice, and I believe Ronald Reagan was right when he talks about the shining city on the hill. I think Farragut is a shining city. We're not necessarily on a hill, but we are a shining city, and I'm a big fan of that. Mayor, I knew all the mayors from Bob Leonard to Eddie Ford to Ralph McGill. And by the way, Ralph McGill was always said that he was a big supporter of Continental Properties. He believed Continental Properties was a fine developer. They're out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, the main entrance to this town, Alderman Paulman, is through Village Commons Drive. We built that drive up to the senior facility with the help of the staff in the town, and spent the money to build that entrance. That's the main entrance to this property, not Boring Road. We're happy to widen Boring Road up to the northern boundary, but there'll be no access to Boring Road, not with this plan that we're proposing. We're only proposing the multifamily housing at this time, not the duplexes, as you said. We're only proposing the multifamily, but there'll be no exit on Boring Road. It's only coming off Village Commons Drive. The second thing that it's a little perplexing to me, we've had this land use plan forever, and it calls for medium density residential 6 to 12 per acre. We worked with Mark Shipley and David Smoke, and we only are asking for 8 per acre. Now, those of you that know apartment home communities, a lot of your folks would live there if we get this built. They don't build them on 8 per acre. They go 10 or 12 or even 14 per acre. We've done some apartment developments other places, sold land to people. 8 per acre is very low. And this Continental Properties out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that we've known for years. I've known their chairman, their president for 35 years. Great developer. A lot of apartment developers don't have the equity to do apartments. There's some other apartments proposed other places in Farragut that haven't happened. And the reason they haven't happened because you have to have 25% equity for lenders at least to make it happen. You borrow money, you put about 25% equity in, and a lot of people can't do that. So 8 per acre is real low. Now, if we go through this process and with the Village Commons Drive, that's the main entrance that we built for both sides of this property in behind Farragut Press, east and west. And we get turned down, then we come back with, we'll probably come back with a senior independent living. Now, if we come back with senior independent living, I'll bet you a lot of people would be for that, because that's where your parents will be. That's where people don't want a hassle to go into assisted living, memory care, which will be right next door to it. They would go into senior independent living. So we can go through this process, and I know everyone in the room, for the most part, is wary of apartment homes, but they would fill up and it'd be a very good project. Now, as far as Eddie's property, who was mayor here, we're a big fan of Eddie and Linda Ford. We've known them for years. They graduated in 1957 from Farragut High School. I graduated in '63. The problem with, and we offered Eddie and Linda a lot of money for their property, and they want a lot more money. So nobody can make that deal work. It's hard to get commercial. It's hard to do multifamily. It's hard to do single family. But it's not fair, according to my legal advisors, for you to deny our zoning because you're protecting another property. Even though I love Eddie and Linda, it's not legally right to do that. I think it's illegal. So in this document that the staff put together, there's a paragraph in here that says clearly, Christie, that they might not want to approve this because it says right here in your staff report, though the future land use map does show medium density residential, which is 6 to 12, it's been that way for a long time, the land use plan, and we've adhered to that, Mayor, for a long time. We believed this would happen. Now we're only asking for 8 per acre. It says, though the future land use map does show medium density residential for the property, a consideration for any multifamily residential rezoning outside of the mixed-use town center land use area, that's the property up the road, is whether this could compromise the marketability of multifamily residential in the town center. And I know we all want a town center, but that's hard to pull off. The property there is pretty narrow on Kingston Pike. It's real deep, Mayor, 3,800 feet deep. It's hard to do a multifamily. Michael Bates will tell you. It says it's whether this would compromise the marketability of multifamily residential in the town center, where the additional density from a multifamily development like we're proposing would likely be needed to sustain the non-residential component of the town center. So you're saying here, a legal document of the town of Farragut, that we may not get what we want because you're protecting another property. Now, we ran into this in Charlotte, North Carolina one time, and we had a big problem over there on a big shopping center where a town was protecting a property down the street they wanted to put a shopping center on, and they were trying to deny our zoning, so we had a big fight over that. So I just want to say that for all of us that are here that love Farragut, and I love it as much as anybody, I've been here longer than most of you, is you can't deny one land use, Chairman Holliday, to protect another one. That's illegal. And the town will be in trouble if that's the excuse you use to deny zoning. So I'm just telling you, our attorneys, we've checked with some other attorneys, they say it's illegal. But if we go through the process, and y'all are the bosses, you're the ones that have the authority, and you turn us down, then we'll probably come back with an independent living where you have meals, you have apartment for seniors. It's not assisted living, it's not memory care, but it would be senior independent living. A lot of things are happening in the country that way. So thank you, and I don't think anybody would deny that we are a big supporter of the town of Farragut. We've always been that way, and we always will be. But we don't want the town to do things that are illegal. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that.
If I may, again, my name is Christy Meyer with the same address as the two gentlemen before me for Horn Properties. I just want to speak to your concern about the land use plan. And the reality is the land use plan has been adopted. It's what is out there for the public to look at and to adhere to. And I think that is not something that you can bring up now if you've already adopted the plan. Upon passage of a plan like that, it's the city's responsibility to effectuate the plan, and that's what we have worked very hard to do, and to cooperate with your planning department and make adjustments in order to make it more beneficial and more attractive to the rest of the community. So, that's all I want to add.
May I just speak to that? Because I appreciate what you're saying. We have a future land use plan update committee that is actively working, and we've already updated the Watt Road corridor. We updated the Outlet Drive corridor, and we're currently looking at the McPhee Road corridor. In our land use plan policy 2, it does state the plan should undergo a major review and update if appropriate at least once every 5 years. So we are able to do that. I did not use the fact that we're trying to save apartments for some other place. My concerns are, is this land use plan, where we have the designations, is it correct? Is it, I think it needs to be addressed.
It's my understanding that this particular part of the land use plan, at least, was recently adopted.
Changed, not adopted, changed. We did amend it to approve the civic institutional area. That was changed from the medium-density residential where it was. In fact, in one of the changes when we did the Watt Road is what brought in the change of the medium-density residential from 6 to 12 to make it 6 to 8, and then we amended to high-density residential as 9 to 12. So we are coming in and amending it, and I will, just for clarity, the Planning Commission adopts this. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen did not.
I understand that, but that's the way it's done in Tennessee. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't conform then the zoning ordinance after the fact. And if you meet all the criteria for the land use plan, the zoning should be granted.
But you don't meet all the criteria. As far as I read it, if it remains medium-density residential, it is not semi-gridded, it is not interconnected. There is that is what is looked for in the medium-density residential, is an interconnectivity. So I understand.
That's something I would have to look at.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the Planning Commission have any questions or comments?
Again, tonight was for information purposes, to hear what the folks had to say here. I think we've heard that.
I have a question, Mayor.
I think we have some more
Yes.
people that want to ask. So,
I have a-
Roseanne, you want
Mr. Horn, you made mention that
Can you
if
please
this
get the
should,
microphone?
if this should fail to be approved for development of apartments there, that you would resort to a senior living facility. Then the question arises, do we need another senior living facility, you know?
Yeah. Well, let me say something. Let me say something about. As we know, our great President Donald Trump, which I don't support, but Donald Trump and people say we don't pick winners and losers in communities and public entities. Now, if I'm in here asking for a church, you're not, the Planning Commission and Board of Mayor and Aldermen are not going to say, well, Doug, we have too many churches, so we don't want another church. I want to propose another grocery store. Well, we got too many grocery stores. You can't say that we have too many senior independent living, so you don't need another one, or really the apartment multifamily either, because that's a free enterprise decision. This is American free enterprise. No one knows that. If we have the audacity to borrow money and put equity money in a deal, it's our decision.
Absolutely.
And like a new school, well, we need a new primary school. Well, no, we don't, because we got one that's got some vacancy. So really, the town shouldn't tell us what we can't do as private land, private property rights. That's a constitutional right.
Kind of the point I was wanting to make, exactly, is that we wouldn't be trying to tell you what to put your money into, whether a senior living facility or apartments or single-family homes, for that matter. But you would have to make that decision. And so I was kind of implying.
Yeah, that's right.
Would you really think that would be an appropriate
Yes.
decision
Well,
to make?
I found out Roseanne around the country. John Cantrell from Southeast Bank was just telling me back there, he's financed 2 or 3 of these senior independent living. They're not assisted living or memory care. It's just seniors that want an independent lifestyle. It's not assisted living or memory care like we have on the west end of this
Right.
property. So those are
Keckley
becoming
has
in
there,
vogue now.
isn't it?
Those are becoming popular around the country for seniors like me and some others in the room that
You
might
had
want
me to that.
independent living but not assisted living or memory care.
Isn't that what the villages at Farragut are?
No, ma'am. No, those are assisted living and memory care.
Oh, what Gary Keckley told me.
And he's going to put
I
some
begged-
independent,
Yeah. I
he's going to
begged
put
him.
some independent villas there, but not independent apartments.
Well, he called me, he, unless I totally misunderstood, Mr. Horn, Gary Keckley told me that those were independent living quarters. And then memory care would be coming after an independent villas. Now, you can add on services that may mimic, if you will, assisted living, but I think he's calling it.
No, he's going to put in independent villas west of the assisted
Yeah, I
living
agree with that.
building. It's villas,
Well, I won't speak
and we don't want to do a
authoritatively
senior
by any means.
independent living. We'd rather do multifamily for millennials. That's another thing the town needs is more professionals, millennials, young people coming to Farragut. They can't get in Farragut right now. People in their infancy of their occupation, it's hard to get in Farragut in a living unit. And I've heard some people say in this town before, I won't mention any development, but there are people that say, we need to propose some low-income housing. Well, we're not going to do that because we are big proponents of Farragut, and we don't want to propose some low-income housing project. And there's a couple of developments in the town now that I've heard, actually, some past officials of this town say that it's too low-income a unit, which we shouldn't be saying that. But we're not proposing that, but we might propose senior independent, Roseanne, if this doesn't work. But please do not say you won't do this because of another property up the road, because that, according to our lawyers, is illegal, and town do things like that, you're going to get sued. So you don't want a lawsuit on your hands.
Of course not.
No, we don't either.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on the planning commission?
I have a couple observations. The first observation that I have is that we built a land use plan a number of years ago and spent a tremendous amount of time in public outreach, and had actually a pretty good turnout of citizens involved in that process, and it was a lengthy process, and I was involved in that committee for a long time. What I'm seeing here, and I'm not looking at the site plan per se, but I'm looking at the zoning, this is consistent with the land use plan that we approved. The other thing that I'm also seeing is that we asked applicants a number of years ago to start feathering the density between 2 different zoning districts. This does that. It feathers from commercial to multifamily to R4 back to R3 to Baldwin Park. This addresses that. And then the final thing that I have a lot of experience with in the town is the lack of affordable housing. When we are trying to recruit companies to set up shop in the town of Farragut, whether that's a call center or that's a medical office, I'm working with a husband and wife dental team right now, their struggle is trying to hire staff who can work in the town of Farragut, and the reality is because their staff can't afford to live in the town of Farragut. The average age of all Farragut citizens is 10 years older than the average age of the citizens of Knox County. Something this board, and we have codified this in the land use plan, is that we struggle to try to attract millennials. When I have tried to attract what I thought would be a cool thing for the town of Farragut, which is one of these little microbreweries, which I thought would be fun, the first thing they said is, "You're too old. We don't want to come to the town of Farragut because you're too old." And this is a way, whether we like the plan or not, there's obviously a lot of people that are very emotional about this. This is a way to help address the age issue that we have in the town of Farragut to be able, so when my kids graduate high school, maybe they could afford to live in the town of Farragut, because right now, with the average price of a house, especially a new construction house, and I'm guilty of it. I mean, I build houses, they're expensive. Bob's back there, they're expensive, but the reality is Farragut's expensive, the land's expensive, and our zoning doesn't allow the density to have affordable housing. This is a way to do it. The apartments that maybe some of us think of, and I can't speak for anybody else but myself, when we look at apartments, we may think of old shanty apartments from the 70s. That's not what's being built today. These are nice apartments. I've seen what the new apartments that have to comply with the energy code, have to comply with the architectural design standards. You can't build cheap apartments. The town of Farragut doesn't allow you to build cheap apartments, so you end up with apartments for professionals. Does that allow somebody to find a $600 a month apartment? No, it doesn't. Maybe you can find a one bedroom for $1,100? Yes, probably you can do that. And that's about as cheap as you can get into the town of Farragut. Even if you wanted to rent a 40-year-old house, trying to rent a 40-year-old house in the town of Farragut for less than $1,000 is almost impossible. I'm not saying there's some houses that are out there, but we're missing some things about saying, hey, we don't want this. It's in the town of Farragut, or there's too many apartments or too many senior living. What we're missing is, would we like to not have some of the things that the millennials are attracted to when they all want to go to downtown Knoxville? And that's where they want to live because there's amenities down there. Now, downtown Knoxville's expensive too. But the reality is that sometimes we kind of miss the forest for the trees. And I'm not supporting Doug's project or one other project, but it's not about having a popularity contest. It's about, hey, what do we want this town to look like in 5 and 7 years ago when we were working on this land use plan? That's what we heard from our citizens is we wanted some housing like this. When we had lots of pictures up on the wall and we gave citizens little dots, and you put little dots on things that you like, these are the things that citizens put dots on. Now, these apartments, this is not, the apartments from the 70s. These look different. They have a little more of a downtown style. We're not getting into architecture tonight, but with the brick requirements that the town of Farragut has, you end up with something that has a little bit more historical architecture than what was built 30 or 40 years ago. What I'm seeing here, the applicant has come up with a plan that is exactly what we asked for, and now we're changing the rules on them and saying, well, we don't like your plan. And I don't think that's fair.
Anybody else questions, comments from the planning commission? Mark, you've got some cards if they still have questions.
Mark Bart?
Been doing this with Mark for a long time. Bart, do you have any cards that the people still have a question after what we've talked about?
Yeah, we've got 4 people signed up to speak. The first 2 will be George Cooper, followed by Michael Wilson.
My name is George Cooper. My wife Susan and I moved to Farragut this past May at 325 Bernie Circle after stints in Chattanooga and beautiful Hamilton County, and then next Loudoun County. And so we excitedly moved back to Farragut.
Your address?
325 Bernie Circle.
Okay.
325 Bernie Circle again. Same address. A side note, Doug, my dad and your work lives paths crossed, and my dad always liked Doug, just as a side note. Same, George Cooper. Yeah. And if I recall, you were on the general manager's staff. Yep. I'm a 64 graduate of Central High School as well as Susan, and we used to pass out maps of how to get to Farragut when we played Farragut in football. Nobody knew how to get here. I'm going to amend what my commentary was going to be just a little bit. This process of reviewing this rezoning is going to be a real opportunity if it's used right or if it's used fully. It would be well to consider why so many people have chosen to plant roots in Farragut. a community that has a real heartbeat for preserving and enhancing livability and home values. It would be well to look ahead and maybe just confirm what we want the town to be and look like. Not just in the next 5 or 10 years, but 20 years from now. Regarding the R6, that zoning density, what jumps out is the variation in the density that's defined by R6. There's 100% variation. It's already been mentioned between the high end and the low end densities. That's it. It would appear to be almost an impossible range of densities to work with to review and look at accommodating a particular concept. The idea of apartments for rent versus condos or something else is something I would hope the commission would look at in light of livabilities. The town concept, and that's been mentioned, notwithstanding the reality of it, it has livability, it has connectivity, it has walkability goals that might best accommodate and fit what a rezoning for this property would otherwise be used for. So, notwithstanding what's been said about the challenges of making a town center a reality, it would appear that a concept that involves rental apartments might best fit the town center concept and meet and incorporate realize the goals of walkability, connectivity, and such. Susan and I didn't move here to be in an average community. We moved here to be in an exceptional community, not just an average community. And after looking at the land use plan, I think the land use plan is much more than a colored map and alphanumeric designations. When I read the narrative, it's much more than just that. And it's something that really should be a living document. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Good evening. My name is Michael Wilson. I reside at 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee, in the McKinley Station neighborhood. To be transparent, I am currently on the Town of Farragut Board of Zoning Appeals. My comments tonight are being made as a private resident of the Town of Farragut and in no way, shape, or form hold any opinion that the Board of Zoning Appeals would hold in any of these matters. I just want to be clear on that up front. I want to start by thanking Continental Properties for the research they presented. In particular, I'd like to highlight some of the numbers in the executive summary they passed out to you. First, the average home value in Farragut is more than double the Knoxville metro average, $445,000 versus $182,000. Second, Farragut is the fastest growing municipal district in the Knoxville metro area, 2.1% versus 1.1%. Those numbers reflect the 3 decades of hard work by the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. You have made Farragut the most desirable destination in the greater Knoxville area, and we, the citizens, thank you for doing that. As the town notes in their discussion, the zoning ordinance has not been updated to reflect the changes made in the future land use plan last October. In this case, approving rezoning to R6 would be inconsistent with the medium density land use characteristics, as R6 provides for up to 12 dwelling units per acre. In this situation, the ordinance is the binding document. As was brought up, I think, by Roseanne, if this deal fell through and another developer came in, they could come back and ask for R12 if this is for 12 units per acre, and would be in compliance with the current zoning ordinance. So that's a problem. This rezoning would directly contradict the decision made last October when these changes were made to the future land use plan. Also in the discussion, it states that further action is needed to align the zoning ordinance with the future land use plan. So essentially you have two options. You either modify the R5 zoning district to include apartments, or you create an R7 zoning district that is aligned with high-density residential land use description. For the following reasons, I urge you do the latter. First, there are significant differences between R5 and R6 zoning districts. R5 currently provides for two types of dwellings, single and two-family. As you know, there are many more considerations such as parking, interior lighting when discussing multifamily dwellings. The minimum development requirements for R6 have 5 requirement statements not included in R5. You can see the R6 medium density development requirements items 3, 4, 5, 7, and 9. Attempting to incorporate these requirements and align them to the varying R5 property types would be confusing and difficult to apply consistently. So therefore, I believe an R7 district, which would be tied to essentially an R6 with some modifications as the town saw fit, would be a better decision to make. Second, the single and two-family dwellings of R5 can be built in areas described as low density and very low density residential. Apartments cannot. This is not a clean alignment of the zoning ordinance with the future land use plan. So in consideration of the changes to the future land use plan density designations last year, the town should reconsider the density designation of all vacant parcels before making rezoning decisions. And this is well underway, has been talked about on Watt Road, Outlet Road, and other places across the town. Before we rezone property, we should make sure that that land use is appropriate for that location. The community, particularly those surrounding the parcels, ought to be part of that discussion. That's in keeping with the spirit of this town, that the town of Farragut makes decisions and the residents make decisions on what happens in the town. Bart, can you put up the general description of the drawing? I want to read something from R6 multifamily residential district, the general guidelines. These areas should be free from severe natural environment limitations and provide access to a street having a designated classification as arterial, or a street which is not interior to a subdivision and which directly accesses a street having a designation classification of arterial. Now, where that main road dumps out of the apartment complex as it's drawing, I would argue that it's not an arterial road, and that is internal to the subdivision of that property, and thus that main entrance would not meet the requirements of the R6 zoning district general description. Hence, what that would mean is that they would actually have to put their main entrance on Boring Road, and as has been stated by several members of the commission, would mean that whole road needs to be developed to handle the traffic. So again, I ask that this panel and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen look at all of these large parcels, look at the land use, make sure that it makes sense for the areas that they're in before we make any more rezoning decisions, particularly on very high density property. Thank you.
Just comment, Michael, I always enjoy when you come up here because I get an education, and I appreciate that. I will say this about R5. I know that we're struggling with it's a very not used, and we're trying to find a solution for the missing middle housing. The kind of the condos or the what do you call them, brownstones or attached single family, and the idea that we would take attached single family or single family and mingle multifamily with it is putting us right back in the problem we had when people were coming for senior housing or senior living facilities, because it was combined with the apartments, and we had to take that out of R6 and put it in its own zoning district. That's how we ended up with S1. Is it S1 that is our senior living?
Yeah.
So I feel like if we're doing that with our R5, we're going to end up in the same situation. You zone it for R5, and you're not quite sure what it is. It might be one person has this intention, and the next person that comes along, you have something completely not what you intended. So I appreciate what you said, and
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Next.
Yeah, we have two more people signed up. The first is Rick Catalvi, and the second is Dustin Mills.
If Mills would please get up and get over there where you can be next.
Good evening, Rich Cataldi. Many of you already know me. 419 Belfield Road from Village Green. And I came here just to gain some information and insight into what this rezoning is looking like. Some of the questions that have come out of our subdivisions information gathering are, what's the price of these apartments? What are they going to go for? What we're looking at across the street from the freeway is $1,200.
We can't ask that.
Well,
The zoning
I understand that now, okay. Impact to the school. I heard that the primary school had vacancies in it, but yet I saw 2 new portable classrooms going out there because they needed more classroom space. The impact to the school system is not ours. It's Knox County. We need to concern ourselves with that. You were worried about 50 housing units impacting the road around the last article. Now you're looking at, what, 300 vehicles from 200 housing units impacting a road that is already full. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road and Grigsby Chapel. Watts Road, is that getting bigger anytime soon? I haven't seen the bypass come out with any proposal lately either. I don't know if that's even still a possibility of bypassing Farragut to get people to the other side of town. These are the kind of questions we'd like to have answered before we go ahead and come up with a position. But I can tell you that the citizens next to Boring Road are concerned with what you're looking at. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm going to add just something with the student yield. I spoke to Susan Horn on Tuesday, knowing that we were going to be talking about this. Apartments tend to have a much lower student yield if you put 200, if you're looking at 8 units per acre.
Right.
So let's just say 8 units per acre, single family or single family attached, or 8 units per acre apartments. These apartments are there's 100 of them are going to be studio or 1 bedroom. You're more than likely not going to see a family come in there.
Not a big impact there, but the other.
And so I'm just an education.
Yes.
You tend to have, according to the MPC numbers, the Metropolitan Planning Commission numbers, you tend to have a lower student yield with apartments than you do with single family and single family attached. It's just a piece of information that Susan Horn passed on to me.
That.
I'm passing it on to you.
That's good information for us to pass on to. Thank you.
Okay, next. Is it Mills?
Yep, Dustin Mills.
We need you to come up to the microphone, please. No, we've got to have you up to the microphone.
He's trying to be champion of millennial. I'm a millennial. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I got here, hard work. As you guys die off, millennials will take over. That's just the way things go. And this is my first meeting. I came in to talk about school and all this stuff. And after seeing him try to come in here strong arm and say, I know you. I went to school with yada, yada, yada. Now I'm angry. Because now it's like the good old boys running town.
Okay. I don't assume.
That's all.
Mr. Mills, did you hear my statement? Mr. Wills, when did you get here?
You're not willing to come down here and be quiet.
When did you arrive? Did you hear me speak? Okay, so you heard my concerns, and I'm an elected official. Okay, so Mr. Horn is a pillar of our society. He's really done a lot for us, and I appreciate everything he's done for our community. But I'm going to have an independent voice, sir. So
we're not going to get into an argument like this tonight. If you want to continue Louise go ahead, but please let her talk. And then you can have your time to talk again, but you're going to have to talk at the microphone.
This is, as a community, we are all volunteers sitting at this table. As an elected official, I'm not paid. I was at a HOA meeting with the Baldwin Park last week. I reached out to them when I knew this was going to be on the staff developer because I knew they were going to be upset. They were going to need some guidance. They have new people in their subdivision that weren't here the first time around. And so I sat down with them. I kept pushing. I told Mr. Schreier, I need to sit down with you. You need to understand land use plan. You need to understand zoning. You need to understand so that you can make your discussion in an educated way, that you can, if you're upset about something or you don't understand how something works, that you can present your issue in an educated way so this body can understand what you're concerned about. We are all residents, and our Board of Mayor and Aldermen is term limited. Thank God for that. Somebody voted us at term limits because this is a hard job, and we need citizens who care to be involved. You're all here tonight. You're a captive audience. I'm thrilled that there's people here. I will tell you how the people that, since I've been here, how people arrived on this board. I'll start with Miss Dick, who helped found this town. This amazing town was founded because a group of people were fed up of going down to the MPC and dealing with flooding in their backyards and no erosion control and no street designs and no street reasons, the things that you need to put into a road to make it last a while. So they got together and they formed this town. It started out as 6,000 people. We're at 22,600 people. That's not a small town anymore, but we have accomplished having a small town feel. We are feeling the pressures of growth from southwest Knox County and northwest Knox County. Lenore City keeps getting closer to our borders every day. So we're struggling with the traffic that comes with that. People that serve as residents come in here. Roseanne came here when the last rezoning request came through. People were very upset. They didn't quite understand the process, and they would get up there and they would be rude and they would be disrespectful and they would be loud, and you couldn't understand what their concerns were. It got lost in the emotion. Every time Roseanne got in that line, I thought, oh, thank you, Lord. I'm going to understand somebody. Somebody's going to talk, and she's going to be informed, and she's going to be respectful, and I'm going to hear her concerns. And then Michael Wilson, when he started out, he was pretty angry. And as he read this land use plan, he studied it, he read it, he gave us information that, quite frankly, it's very hard to even to digest all of this. He's on our Board of Zoning and Appeals. John Green showed up. He called me one day, said, I want to be able to cross Watt Road well. I want a safe crossing. And I said, great, John. You come on in. You get people to support you. You get the neighborhoods involved. You get community involved. And write emails. That's what he did. He started showing up at meetings, and the next thing you know, he's standing on our planning commission. Scott Russ applied for Ron Williams' final finish of his term. Started showing up and being involved, and he sits on the planning commission. The people that sit here are your neighbors. The people that go to your board, that are on your board of mayor and aldermen, are your neighbors. There was a next door post that went on for 208. There's 208 injuries. There might be more now. I stopped reading it because it got so nasty, and so there was like this echo chamber. And I kept waiting for an email or a phone call from someone in this chain to say, hey, what's the deal here? What's going on? What don't I know? Because trust me, I'm still on a learning curve, and I'm 5-6 years into the planning commission and 3 years into my term. We need people to be passionate and involved to keep our community the wonderful place that it is. But when you get into this echo chamber and you're all talking to each other and you're making these assumptions and you're not talking to people that are up here making decisions, we can't be informed. You live where you live. I live where I live. I need to understand what's going on where you are. So I appreciate that you're frustrated, but town of Farragut has always been independent thinking, and it takes people being informed to remain that. We are struggling with the kind of growth we're seeing. Hardin Valley is expecting between 8 and 15,000 new homes, not people, homes. That is going to impact us. And there is little we can do about it. Our schools are crowded. That is a conversation you need to have with Susan Horn and John Schoonmaker, and you need to start having it now, because they need to understand what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, because if you're not getting pressure from the residents, they're just going to let that one, because Hardin Valley is getting all of the energy right now. So I appreciate that you're all here, and I'm going to get off my soapbox. I love my community. If I'm not here serving as an alderman or a planning commissioner, I will find ways to volunteer in my town. That's how much I love it. So thank you.
We're adjourned.
This September 19th meeting of the Planning Commission is adjourned. There are no utilities, so we'll move on.
Chairman, Rita.
No, you know what? HOA is a good way to hone your